Okay, being 7:04, I will call the meeting of the Finance Committee of March 7th, 2016 to order. This meeting is being recorded for live broadcast and television replay. If anyone in the audience is audio video taping, they need to acknowledge at this time. Carol Mitchell. Reserve fund transfers?
No.
None at this time. Note excused or absent members. So excused members who I have heard from are Michelle Ford, John Redmond, Andy Roth, and Karen Meehan. I think that's it. Then that's 8 here, so that's it. Review and discuss fiscal year 17 budgets, the fire department budget, Chief Sylvester. And anybody else you want to bring up with you. Good evening, gentlemen. If you would introduce yourselves for the viewers at home.
I'm Chief Norman William Sylvester Jr., Bourne Fire Chief.
Deputy Chief Joe Carrara.
Deputy Chief David Palonzi, Bourne Fire.
Good evening, welcome, gentlemen. Okay, so, where would you like to start? Fire department budget is in our books on tab 5, page 220-38.
Well, beginning with the fire department budget, I'd like to start with some of the questions that were presented to me. At my meeting with Mr. Slade and Mr. Perry a few days ago, we started talking about some of the operational stuff for the Bourne Fire Department, and some of the questions that were being presented were, FY16 as well as 17 budgetary items, which included some of the questions that were sent out to all the department heads. So with that, for the people that don't know at home, the Bourne Fire Department presently has 45 employees, a chief, myself, 4 deputies, 8 lieutenants, and 32 firefighters. We also have 12 call members who get paid per call, and I have 1 administrative assistant. She pretty much runs the department, oversees everything that comes through, handles a lot of the paperwork that keeps the daily operations running for the department. Our goals are pretty straightforward and simple for the fire department. We're trying to provide the best service we can to the citizens of Bourne with what we have to work with. The 2 deputies, actually all the members of the Bourne Fire Department realize that in this tough financial times that we got to do more with less. And we've been working that with the way some of the operational procedures have been reevaluated and moved around since I've taken over as chief a little over a year ago. In doing so, we're actually getting better coverage for the community. We're able to provide a better service to the citizens by having the members respond faster, able to get a faster turnaround on the actual calls themselves, so they're back in service. It might sound like that doesn't mean a lot, but when you look at the overall picture for like overtime and keeping the members in, it all adds up. So a little bit here, a little bit there, gives a significant amount of savings, we're hoping, throughout the entire operation for this year. This would be the first full year that we've had a test of this new, moving the manpower out of headquarters, Buzzards Bay, and spreading around town. And in doing so, our run times have gone down, even though our runs have gone up significantly. In doing so, people don't realize that we did a total of 4,929 runs last year, calls. Roughly 3,695 were EMS calls, which in motor vehicle crashes, call for help, heart attacks, chest pains, that type of stuff. 1,234 were fire. That means the engine, calls for service, lockouts, COs, calls. In doing so, that should give you a rough idea that when we're running with 9 people on a shift, that could mean they're averaging, I'm gonna say anywhere during the summer months, upwards of 18 to 20 something calls per day when during the busy. We just take the average median. Ultimately, some of the things that I gotta look for the upcoming year was moving, and I've been talking to the town administrator, headquarters from Buzzards Bay out to Sagamore. That's one thing I'm really trying to get done. The reason's simple. I have a lot of older folks in the town of Bourne who are trying to get service from us, coming in for a simple permit. It's very difficult for them to make the stairs. So with the elevators that's already in Buzzards Bay, I don't have to ask you for a significant amount of money or through facilities to try to put one in Buzzards Bay. So I've been working with the TA as well as Mr. Nelson about trying to figure out a way to make this happen. So Buzzards Bay, all the administrative stuff would move out to Sagamore to make it more user-friendly for the people of Bourne. Since this year, there's been some other issues that have come up. Some of the challenges was, some of the stations. They're older, a lot older. In doing so, they need some serious repair. I already understand that this town has been working with the PD, looking at schools. In doing so, there's only X amount in the pie to go around. My goal is someday is to hopefully figure out a way through a study or whatever else to possibly consolidate Monty Beach and Pocasset into one station. Looking at it. In doing so, we're hoping, after talking to Mr. Nelson, that should save a significant amount of money just on maintenance and wear and tear. So that's another option that we're looking into in regards to 17, just figuring out a plan to figure out where to place it. What's the best location. I have my ideas, but let somebody from the outside come in and tell me when they do all the graphs and circles and whatever else they do to figure out what would be the best spot for that. The members, it's more than just doing the calls, and people don't realize that in the fire service. I'm extremely, extremely proud of the members and what they've done over this past year in regards to doing more inspections, whether it's residential or commercial. The training that's going on for the fire and EMS that they've taken part of, as well as trying to educate themselves to better themselves to make the entire department better. Their public assist, which means they're putting in car seats. They're doing a lot more public education. They're installing Knox boxes for the elderly so that they can get there and feel a little bit safer. So if they fall, we can get in the house without doing any damage. Once again, I'm a big advocate that a lot of little things end up making a significant difference when you look at the overall operation of this department. Now, with these changes, it does take money. Like everything else, I got my budget requests from the town through the town administrator, and after sitting down with him and what we can afford, it's not perfect, but I'm gonna make it work. Like all the other department heads, we have been, and I'm gonna tell you right now, making it work. I mean, in doing so, we have to stay focused at what we're here for, and that's to provide a service, but I have to work with the means that they're giving me. We are one of the largest departments that generates revenue. We all hear about the ambulance receipts and what we do and billing for ambulance. Well, is there more we can do? Well, we do more than just that. Permit fees, some of the meeting room fees, inspection fees that we do, also gets all thrown into this pot. But a lot of people just think the fire department is strictly ambulance revenue, for generate how much goes into the town. We don't get it, it goes into the general fund. Collections, however else, all gets put into that, and then it gets dispersed based on the town administrator's recommendation, and I'm sure Linda's. There's things that I can do that I'm looking into. This was one of the first years we started billing for hazmat incidents. We all know about the tanker at the Rotary. We bill for that. Boat fires, we bill for that. battery trucks that drop batteries on the road. We bill for that. So now we're starting to look at possibly billing for motor vehicle crashes, to recover some of the time, money that's lost on supplies, equipment, manpower that goes along. This is in addition to the ambulance billing, transporting people to the hospital. I'm looking at possibly trying to design eventually, long-term, a 3-station or 2-station model for this town, saving money. Splitting the force, if we go to 2 north and south, or if we go with 3, Buzzards Bay, Sagamore, and I say Monument Beach, Pocasset, whatever it is, to save money. That's my ultimate goal, and that's gonna take some time and a little bit more out of my pay grade to figure out how we're gonna get this to come to fruition. Stuff I'm doing right now is we're starting to streamline our operation. And what do I mean by that? I keep stressing. We're gonna go, and I'm starting to start looking at electronic permitting. Keep it simple. I'm hoping that as time goes on, we can do payments online, we can issue permits directly from the iPad or tablets that'll be issued to the members. So they go out, they do it, they email the permit right back to you. Commercial inspections, they take the pictures, they do the report, they send it right to that business owner right then and there, so that he or she has it directly in front of them. Now we have a permanent record, so if there's any violations, the next deputy or myself can go out and look at what was there, see if there's any corrections, and move on. Also, it's more than just doing inspections. We can use it for the computer-aided dispatch. We can enter a ton of information for the building safety, which is also going to be utilized now by the dispatch center. So they can give the information for mutual aid companies of where the hydrant location is, where the connections are for the certain buildings that are in the community. Capital projects, I put in for a few things this year. I haven't heard, I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to the town administrator. He's been crazy busy doing a bunch of other things. One of them was I was looking for a fire truck. I was looking for a new command vehicle, and I was also looking for AEDs. So with that, you know, we all know about capital projects. It's not like I'm buying small vehicles, but these vehicles now getting up in age. I had one today, a fire truck fail, a simple inspection. It's nothing that we can't fix temporarily, but it's the one that was coming up for replacement anyhow. In doing so, the trucks are getting up in age, so we have to spend more money on maintenance and parts, but we'll work on that. Like I said, I understand the town's tough financial status, but we're trying to progress and move forward with that. I have presently, I have 3 open positions that I have to deal with for the town under the SAFER grant. We're in the process of interviewing, hiring now. I also have one long-term injury who's been out, and he was in the other day, but I haven't heard a lot in regards to he's progressing, but I don't have anything in regards to more definitive when he's coming back. So right now I'm running short on 4 people, but I'm gonna fill the 3 SAFER people by July 1st of this year. We've already started the process, the interviews, the backgrounds. Our goal is I'd rather take a little more time to do more thorough backgrounds on these individuals now than to have problems later. And it's a new, not a new concept, but we're really starting to dig into these positions and these people being hired. Overall, that's our goals of dealing with what we had to for 16 and what I'm looking for 17 and 18. Combining stations, I have to purchase a certain amount of equipment, deal with the manpower issues and some collective bargaining and stuff, which I'm not gonna get into right now. But once that's all said and done, the department all in all should be in pretty good shape if I get all this. I hope I answered most of or all your questions. If you want to talk about the actual line items now, I'm here for you, but you can all read. What we did was a lot of the stuff we looked at, you'll notice there's some significant decreases on some items, but there's also some increases on other ones. A good example is like the EMS supplies. By us increasing by 20,000, we are now providing a lot of the supplies to the police. So what we're doing is we're making it so that they come to us, we give them what they need to continue their operation, i.e. the AED pads, oxygen cylinders, stuff that they need to keep their cars on the road fairly quickly. Other items were stuff that, once I get the full positions filled, I'm hoping to save some money in regards to like the overtime budget. But I gotta get these positions filled first, and then I can get these people on the floor so they don't count towards staffing levels. What we did for a lot of them was we started to merge some of the accounts where we had a little bit in this one, a little bit in this one, and putting them together, i.e. like office supplies and building and stuff like that, where we had multiple little accounts and we just put them together. And then we also started looking at like data processing and some of the larger ones that the repair contracts. These are stuff that we have to have in regards to, for the EMS side, record keeping, record management, dealing with the computers if they go down, so that we can physically go and have the technicians or the companies that ambulance billing manage these accounts for us throughout the year. These are service fees, a lot of them. Questions, comments?
George?
Just a comment. We gleaned, as Chief Sylvester mentioned, if you look under supplies, well, actually, you look under purchase of services also, just about everything. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of pluses and minuses as far as percentage from the last year's appropriation versus the final number that we're using as the town administrator recommended budget. But anyway, within each of the salaries category, the services, the supplies, there's a lot of churn, a lot of pluses and minuses, but the bottom line is small. In other words, I think for all the work that you did, I think it tied out pretty well in that if you take the $20,000 that you referred to in mutual aid, or excuse me, the medical supplies, which is that defibrillators or?
That's part of it, as well as the other supplies that they might need, bandages, oxygen tanks, whatever
these
they
are
use.
One of the services that you provide, it's like an intra-town transfer that, you, through your buying expertise or whatever like that, you know what products to buy for other departments. But anyway, that was pretty noteworthy, because if you take the $20,000 out of that, it's pretty much of a level budget. But are you stocking up in that particular category for the medical equipment? In other words, it's a pretty hefty increase. Was this a policy change?
What's happening is, the police department didn't have it. We started maintaining their defibrillators, and this is how this capital came in for the AEDs. We started taking care of them. They would go to the cardiac arrest first. They would put the defibrillators on. Halfway through this process this year, I get notification that they're no longer gonna handle these machines. In other words, they're outdated. They're not gonna be able to get parts from them anymore. So in doing so, we're trying to make it so that the fire department will be one-stop shopping. So if you need supplies, you come to us. We already have them in the Sagamore station or the outlying station, so you can get them. So we're looking for continuity and consistency, so everybody has the same equipment. Keep it simple, stupid, that's me. Keep it as simple as we can, so you know where to go. So if you're a police officer, you can go there. If you're from DNR, you can go there. We'll give you what you use, one-for-one replacement. This should also minimize stuff not being used and expiring before it becomes due, because we're gonna have a constant rotation just for that reason. So you might have a department buy certain equipment. Well, guess what? They buy too much, and it just rots. So now with us constantly moving with everybody, it makes it easier to manage.
I have a question.
Rich?
Yeah, The account 5326, what was going on with that? That's the county dispatching expenses. It looks like the request was a $50,000 increase. But the recommendation is back to about what you had for 2016. Was there a proposed change going on there? Or?
Based, if I could answer that?
Yes.
Based on my discussions with the sheriff's department, when we were going through the override piece and we were looking at the county dispatch bill, because it was gonna go up next year and then up the year before, based on where he is right now, relative to a new facility not being constructed right away, he felt, he and Mr. Perry, the special sheriff, is that, excuse me?
That is correct.
He and the special sheriff, felt that they would be able to pretty much level fund the budget going into 17, which is why that request is down.
Judy?
So you had a few capital outlay expenses that you were thinking about, but they're not in here.
No, even capital outlay budget.
Capital outlay.
Right, so we haven't heard the capital outlay, and capital outlay hasn't made their final recommendation. I think that the defibrillators are definitely gonna be a go. And we already did the ambulance, so we'll look at the other things.
Okay.
When we get to the debt service part of this discussion tonight, we'll talk about what's been happening with debt service and how we have to be careful about our taking on debt service. And we have to have, try to limit major purchases from a department to one per year. So if we've done the ambulance this year, to do an ambulance and a fire truck in the same year is somewhat problematic. So we're kind of trying to work through all of those issues on capital. But capital outlay is meeting Wednesday morning, and then is going to go to the Board of Selectmen on the 15th, and then is going to come to the Finance Committee after that. So we're still working through
It'll
some
look
of
very
those
different
issues.
then.
Well, that's not in this budget. That's a capital outlay budget. It's separate. It's
And
kind
I apologize if I confused you. I was just trying to lay everything out so you know what, because this is one of the few times we get together. So I
Yeah.
want you to know what we've done and what our projections are for the next year, what we're looking for and why.
And just to that, because he mentioned the discussion about the stations and Pecasset Station and Monument Beach Station, and those stations and those concerns were all part of the Cecil report in 2009. And we've just gotten the police station committee going, and the capital outlay committee is talking about doing the feasibility study and the flame report so that we have a plan for the fire department as well. Because I think as we go to town meeting and we're saying we need a school and we need a police station, I think we need to bring the whole picture to town meeting, and we have to know exactly what the plans are and how the cost is gonna lay out, and come up with a unified plan to do what these three major things that are all very important to the town. So,
Oh, go ahead.
I have two quick questions, because they come up occasionally, and it gives an opportunity for you to answer them here as well. When you indicate that you did about 4,900 calls in the last year, and 3,600 plus or minus are EMS related, and 1,200 plus or minus are fire calls, where the truck goes out or that may be. If you send 3 vehicles to one call, it is one call.
That is correct.
If you send, if there are 4 people in a car that you extract from the car, that is one call.
That is correct.
Thank you. I just wanted that clear for the record, because I know there's been some
Okay.
confusion on that. The other question I had is.
Can I,
Oh, yeah,
just
sure.
1 second on that. We just had a pretty significant accident Friday night on a scenic highway. Strictly, Deputy Palonzi was the first one on duty. This is a good example about resources being overwhelmed in a short time. Where we had to call in mutual aid, Falmouth, Wareham, Sandwich, Plymouth, plus our equipment to handle what was going on. A lot of these individuals ended up going to trauma centers, Rhode Island, South Shore, Toby, temporarily, and then was transferred to Boston. This is the kind of stuff that, as a fire chief, we try to prepare for to the best of our ability. But even for us, we can be overwhelmed in a very short time. So, in that case, we had mutual aid coming in, which you might sit there and say 7 different mutual aid companies. So when you look at, another question I would constantly hear is, well, are we making money when we go mutual aid to another community? This is what mutual aid's all about. Sometimes we need it, other times they need our help. So it becomes a wash a lot of times, and that's one of the things I wanted to stress. We needed help. I'm very pleased with what we have, but it wasn't a perfect situation. We had trucks out, and we needed assistance in a very short time. And that's the kind of stuff that the taxpayers gotta understand about what we do and why we do it in a reasonable, to the best of our ability. Sorry.
My second question was, if there was a merger of the Monument Beach and the Pocasset fire stations, which seems to make a lot of sense from a number of different perspectives, will that enable you to enhance or start building up again the call force? We have a good but limited number of folks on the call department, and if we brought everyone in under one roof, it may provide for ease of training, ease of camaraderie, all the things that are necessary.
What we're doing, if people don't know, is this is the first year we started a pilot program with Mass Maritime Academy. The cadets are literally in the fire academy as we speak at Barnstable to make them call firefighters for us. This is the first year. So every year we'll try to grab 8 or 10 more, the best of the best from the academy, to be called firefighters for the town of Bourne. It was a pilot. It still hasn't, they're in it. They're probably 3 or 4 weeks into it, so I didn't want to count them towards the call force until they completed it. Once that happens, we're going to continue on. So when they go to school, they come back in August, September, there'll be call firefighters that we can utilize to assist us on the incidents. So now they'll be able to see the whole process, from EMS to fire, and we can utilize them. So it was one of the things that we started. We're waiting to see how it works out, how they do with the grades, how they actually integrate. I've been spending a lot of time with these individuals. They're loving it. They just can't be counted as firefighters until they complete the training. So I didn't want to mention it when I said the 12 at this point. So we're already starting to recruit some of the cadets. I've had a number of call firefighters start to come to us now from other communities who want to join Bourne Fire. So that's telling us that this is a great community to work in, if they're leaving theirs to come to us. It gives me a JV team to look and to evaluate, the quality of the individuals before they apply to be full-timers.
I just wondered, these guys from the Maritime, are they gonna graduate from school in a couple of years and move on?
What happens is I should get 3 to 4 years out of them. And some, yes, because I'm taking them as sophomores. They have to have certain grade point average. We set a criteria that was pretty intense so that we get the best of the best. Plus, I'm hoping that a lot of them end up staying in the area, and they'll already, integrate into our society. Like I said, it's a pilot. We're gonna work it out. At the end of we'll look and see the pros and cons and see how it works out. We had to try something.
Rich?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the change in your overtime, 349 to projected 245 this year? How will you accomplish that?
That's when I hire the additional people. We can have X amount of people off. I won't have to fill it overtime. Once I get,
These are people from the safe and right?
yes, and everybody else, because once I get them all in place, then X amount could be off before I have to fill it overtime. Now, that doesn't mean, not to sound mean, if we've had a very mild winter, but if we have another bad winter, we have a hurricane come through. Remember, a lot of this is just projections based on, at that time. I can't tell you what emergencies will be going on.
I want to just go back and note a couple of things that the chief had indicated. He's down 4 people right now. one on injured reserve, so to speak, and then, we're in the process of hiring 3, so that's creating some overtime issue, which you can see it's running pretty tight right now as well. The other thing for FY16, when the town opted not to do the dispatch, $115,000 was going to be reduced from his, budget this year. It was coming out of the salary budget, and it was gonna be that transfer over of monies to do that. That didn't happen. So we're watching the, current salary, line of the, folks. We think as we get closer to May, we're gonna know if we have to do some sort of a change to the regular, salary of the firefighters and whatnot, because that was where that money was supposed to transfer around, but it didn't make sense to, after we got through the special and we were putting some things off, to wait to see where that was going to end up toward the end of the year. So that's just more of a marker to pay attention to as we get forward on that.
Bill?
Yes, Chief, just a question for clarification for me. The SAFER grant, doesn't any of the individuals or any of the money in all of these categories, any overtime for them and everything else is within that grant?
That is correct. So,
So that on top of this budget here, that's before us, the actual figure would be the grant, but this is taxpayer money here.
what I was told, and maybe Linda, you can answer this, from when I was talking to Michael, they take my entire budget out of this, and then whatever money is, they take from the grant when I request it, and they put it back into wherever it goes. So I don't know, because I just take, my overall comes out, and then it goes back in once I request
So
it.
inside this figure here, that 3 million is the SAFER grant?
No.
No,
No, that's what I'm just getting.
no, what I'm saying is,
So that, again, that, they understand the offset is nowhere appearing in here, but that's actually in addition, that's not an additional expenditure,
in
that is
addition, right.
offset.
right,
Okay, and that health and everything else.
all comes out of the SAFER grant, that's all covered.
I mean, that's an important thing for people to understand how
Right
this
down,
works.
right down to the training, when I send them sometimes to the academy, all that, their uniforms, their clothing allowance, contractual items all come out of that also.
Just wanted to get that clarified out there.
George?
It'd be good to, footnote that somewhere in our, budget work, because, that can get lost over a period of time when, if the grant we decide not to renew the grant or something like that, and all of a sudden, we've got an issue here, just like, maintenance of vehicles, where you have people performing maintenance, from DPW on fire vehicles, so you're a net beneficiary of that, but it's something that there has to be good, communication as to, how far along these things are. I mean, they would probably have more expertise than the firefighters, I would think.
That is correct.
And, but it's always nice to have that, extend the life of those vehicles, especially using, insourcing, but, it's still, has to, the piper has to be paid sooner or later, so, it's good to know that. But I mean, you know what I'm saying, Linda, as far as, these intra-departmental transfers, I guess. I mean, we discussed the, defibrillators or the medical equipment that is purchased by the firefighters, but the benefit is received perhaps with DNR and.
It will be. Once we put everything in play, once we get them,
Yeah.
all the training, all the defibrillators, all the medical supplies and everything will be for more than just the police, the DNR. It might even be, I hate to say it, the recreation here.
Yeah.
We're gonna take over the town halls. So there'll be a
Buildings
magnet.
and schools. Schools?
I didn't factor schools.
Okay, town buildings.
Okay. So,
Yeah, our fear is you're getting these grants and we're going on year to year, the expenses are nice and even. All of a sudden, the grant expires
Yeah.
and the expense jumps way up, right, George?
Yeah, that's the.
That's the
Well-
fear.
Well, it is understood by the grant employees as well as it's been expounded upon several times by the Board of Selectmen. If the grant is no longer successful, those 8 grant-funded personnel will be dismissed.
Right.
They're not in this budget. Those positions are not in the
Right.
firefighters of
We
the,
understand.
are not in this. But I do have a question about the SAFER grant, because there's 8 positions, but you have 3 vacant. And back in November, when we talked about continuing the SAFER grant, there were 4 vacant, so it sounds like you maybe hired 1. And so what happens with the SAFER grant if you don't use the money in the time period? Does it extend the period of the grant?
Yes.
So that you're going to get the, whatever amount of the money of the grant is, which I don't know,
1.4 million or whatever. it's
per year though, right, is it 1.4 million?
700,
750.
7, I thought it was 720, yeah,
750.
right, right.
$720,000 a year.
That's right.
Hanson got the rest of the money.
Okay. I'm talking to my grant guru.
Yes, I mean, does the period of performance of the grant extend, or do we lose that money? We should get that clarified.
I agree.
Don't answer it tonight.
Okay.
We'll get you the answer.
Okay, because I think that's an important consideration, that especially
Well-
as we go, not this year and next year, but
Would be next,
it would be going into the next year, and I think that's actually how we ended up going until August this year, is that the original grant started in April, but we had a little bit of extra time because of the fact that
we didn't get it, we didn't get it.
it takes a while to get going, and so you get that 1.4 million, and so you'll have a little bit of a leeway, but for planning, and especially for next year, that would be important to know. But those positions are not in here, and at the end of the grant, when it does run out, that'll be a different discussion about how we're gonna handle it.
And they're not in the FTEs for the 1.2 on the salaries of the firefighters.
Yeah, so do you, one of my questions is, do you have an FTE or org chart for the finance committee?
No?
Oh, okay.
I
So
can.
we need to get a copy of that so that we understand, because for the line items, the salaries, the department head would be 1 FTE. Then there's a line item for supervisor, administrative secretary, then,
Right.
and then there's clerical secretary, and then there's firefighters. So what we would want to know is how many FTEs are in each of those, because if you have 32 firefighters,
Mm-hmm.
but if 5 of those are covered by the safety?
No.
Oh,
We have 44,
oh, see, yes, so,
That's including those 8.
correct.
So for this FTE, it's what, 36?
Yes.
There's, if I'm correct, there's 1 in the chief. There's 4 deputy
or
chiefs.
deputies and
8
lieutenants,
and 1 administrative secretary in that particular line,
so that's,
13.
no, well, there's a clerical secretary line also.
So it's
Is there an admin secretary or only a clerical secretary? There's
12.
no admin secretary in
Correct.
police
No.
anymore.
So it's 12.
12 and 1.
1, 12, and 1.
1, 12, 1, okay. And
Firefighters,
36?
Yes.
35 or 13?
6?
It's 45 minus that.
Oh,
12.
Was it 32?
right,
It's 32 firefighters.
32 plus the 8 with the grant. 8,
so there's 32 in this, plus how many current SAFER grant firefighters do you have currently?
there's currently 5.
5 with 3 openings that I gotta fill.
But there's 8 funded.
Yes, but there's currently, yes.
Well, but that's
This is why we need a,
that's
so,
short term.
so what, because we have the same thing happening in the police department, where you have funded positions, unfunded positions, people in positions, people absent in positions, trying to have a handle on what's in the budget. And in that firefighters, 32 firefighters that are in the budget, you have 1 on a long-term leave,
Medical leave,
right? And then the 5 that are SAFER firefighters are not in there.
correct.
Yeah, that would be good for anticipating turnbacks. In other words, if we have, the table organization calls for so many firefighter, or, whatever billet they're filling, and you know that
Right, but you generally will be filling that with an overtime slot, so it's a net loss on
paying it
one,
differently,
right?
yeah. But this happens to be the year of the.
So right
safer
now,
grant, so-
let me just clarify this. When you look at the firefighters, we have 32 firefighters in the town of Bourne, once everybody's filled. 8 of those are grant, so we have 24 in this budget.
That's what we mean.
Yeah, see?
Everybody understand that, what I'm?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, we have a
That's
total
what we
of
wanted
32
to
firefighters, 24 are town of Bourne, I'm gonna say, employees.
So this line item
8
is,
are federal firefighters, that's best, I'm just trying to make it simple.
Okay, and out of the 24 plus 8,
It's 32.
right, you are -3, -1.
Right.
So you only have, right now you have 28 active firefighters, plus the 8 lieutenants, plus the 4 deputies, plus the,
Yes, ma'am.
so in the police department, they call it sworn officers, so that's a little vocabulary lesson for this year. Okay. Yes?
Has there, maybe this is more for the administrator, has there been any thought of a targeted override for these firefighting positions from the Safer Grant, similar to what was done with the police department?
It was discussed a few months ago. We have not had further discussion relative to that. I think as we get closer to FY18, that is something that we're going to have to make a determination on in the next budget season. You know, as we get into the next budget season.
I would say if the grant is not renewed, then we would consider that as a strategy to be able to continue some or all of the Safer Grant firefighters.
I don't wanna
Yeah, but it's not,
as to where the
yeah.
selectmen would be on that at
What
this
is it,
point.
August 2017?
August 2018.
plus a couple, plus a little bit,
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe plus a couple of months.
Yeah. So we have time. I have a question on the supervisors, which is the lieutenants and the deputies. There's a pretty big increase in that line item,
Where are you? I'm sorry.
supervisors, well, I'm not gonna say administrative secretary. So it's a 17% increase in that line. I'm just curious what that's made up of.
If I might.
Yeah.
If you look at FY15, that's where I was saying, we made a reduction, of 4, we made a
Lieutenants.
reduction of 4
Lieutenants.
We went from 12 to 8,
Right,
so. So that's why you see a, I'm gonna say a decrease in that line for 16. And then, while you're looking at the 17, the change, some of this was, like I talked about, possible collective bargaining stuff, issue, numbers that we were asked, you know, to put in. So I don't that was just, like I said, a figure that we plugged in at that point to come up with that number.
could
That
come in, or
be-
could come under or over. It could come in under or come in over.
That is correct.
I also believe the, 115 came out of that,
I think that's why it's down so much.
Yes.
in the budget reduction, the 115 came out of that.
oh, I see.
Yeah.
So that's the,
That's the one we've gotta keep an eye on.
okay. So we should be adding 115 to that 1065 to get kind of
To get to the
actual.
21252.
No, well, that's, you said it was out of the firefighters, and you
yeah,
think it
I-
actually came out of the supervisors?
Correct.
Okay.
I was looking at that, not reading the title, so that was.
Yeah, it
my
doesn't look
error.
like that came out of
No, it didn't come
the
out of the.
firefighters. So instead of a $186,000 increase, it's like a $76,000 increase, which is more in line of what it's. Okay. Okay, FTE and org chart, Safer Grant, question. I really like the idea of this MMA call fighter thing. I think that's really neat.
What?
The MMA call fighter
Oh, yeah, it's a great.
program, that's a really,
Second
that's a
piece we've
great.
used with them, because we also have had them working when the ambulance down there started. There was invitations for the cadets to ride, the ambulance as well, early on. So this is kind of like a progression in what we're doing with the Maritime Academy as well.
Are there any other questions for the, fire chief?
Just one more on the call firefighters. So, logically, you could probably only use them in Buzzards Bay because of the proximity to the academy, or does that matter? Are you able to shift them over to others?
What's gonna happen is, once they finish, and I figure out, cause some kids, I'm gonna say some cadets, future firefighters, might not live on campus. Some decide to live off campus, so we'll figure out where they're actually staying.
Yeah.
So it could be Buzzards Bay, it might be Sagamore, it could be Pocasset if they're living on that side of the bridge. Once they get out, and then I actually get them into the rotation. But they'll still be available to come to do drills, and they'll drill with the other call firefighters. They've already been made aware, the ones from Pocasset and Sagamore, that they're gonna be integrated in. So even if I have to split to get them used to it, I can't let them go by themselves, or I'll start bringing in some of the, I'm gonna say, more seasoned call firefighters into Buzzards Bay Station, just for that reason.
Thank you.
It's a work in progress, that's the best.
Mr. Mulvey, did you have a question? You gotta share a mic with him.
No, that's fine, Joe. I'm very favorably impressed with the department as a whole and the relatively new chief. If I might, through the chair, the engine that's out of service, it isn't just because a couple of headlamps don't light, or is the engine gonna fall out, which makes a difference. The second part of that is, if it's ready to go out, is it on the capital expense program?
The first part is, I haven't had the town mechanic take a look at it. Literally went out this afternoon, so it's pulled in out of service today. Until I actually get him to reevaluate it tomorrow or the next day when he gets back, he was out sick today. Yes, I did put that on the capital outlay as a replacement. If I can nurse it for another year or two, I'll do what I can to get it over the hump. Like, I make it quite clear to everybody else, we're not talking capital right now, but I just don't want us to be like Falmouth. Not to sound mean, where they had to go lease a truck while they're waiting for their new one to be built or buy one. I say that's good money after bad. You hired me to evaluate this department, and this is one of the issues. Some of the equipment now is just because of age.
And just-
How old is it?
95?
I think Joe had here, 95, I don't know.
Off the top of my head, I say,
We got
we-
identical trucks, 94 and then 95, so
Oh, really?
20-something years older than,
If I might, Mr. Chair.
yes.
The new hires, and eventually it'll be a favorable impact on overtime. In the meantime, is there a training expense that's gonna be involved with the new hires that will involve the budget?
To be honest, some of these candidates that have applied, real quickly looking at their applications, already have the training, which should save us money. So that's where we're starting to do the backgrounds, just for that reason. They might not have to go to recruit school because they already have it.
And one other brief one, picking up on what George said, and I'm not opposed to it. But I've had experience with the call firefighters where they were all called firefighters, and there was a separate red phone in each home that would go on a call. So, but to train the MMA, of course, they're gone all summer and for 2 vacation periods. So that's one thing. The other is, it'd be an asset, but the cost, that's something else. And the other is liability.
That's the reason why I won't let them on the trucks until they finish the basic recruit and they become certified in firefighter 1 and 2. In regards to the cost, because we're part of Barnstable County Fire Rescue Training Academy, the training is free. So we're shipping them down there under us, just for that reason. There will be a cost as time comes on in regards to uniforms, gears, pagers, whatever else we gotta give them. But through attrition, some of the gear that the full-timers have, we might be able to, I don't have to give them brand new gear right out of the gate, but as time goes on, yes. But I still believe it's the best and the cheapest way to give me the people that I need to do the job around here. The most efficient.
Okay, yes.
About the county dispatcher on the second page, we've talked quite a number of times about this. The fire department was gonna take it over. Now I see it being budgeted for another year or so. That never worked out, or?
Well, there
what
were a couple of
happened
things, if I could, Madam Chair. The cost, based on the numbers that the chief had provided me, over the next couple of years, assuming that it stays in the progression that the sheriff has indicated, the cost benefit early we didn't cross the line where it was more
We haven't
expensive to
yet.
do one than the other, correct? As we move toward, new equipment, either at the a police station when one is built, we hope to be able to get, sufficient, modules for the dispatch that we can try to follow along perhaps what Sandwich has done recently. They've taken their own over. They've ended up hiring four dispatchers, I believe, civilian dispatchers. Specifically, as I understand it, one does fire, one does police. There's not a lot of crossover. Falmouth is in the process of doing the same thing. So we have a couple of years where we can actually be equal to or less than by continuing this process while we learn off our neighbors on how that works and what the pitfalls and or the advantageousness of it may be.
Makes sense, going slowly. So we still got a bargain.
We still have a relative bargain.
A cost-effective
Don't
solution.
get excited about
Thank you. The bargain was
not
when we had it
excited.
for several years at little or
Sounds
no
better,
cost, but
Okay.
certainly
Okay.
things change and.
No, I just
the
wondered
sheriff-
what happened to that deal, and it's just,
Yeah, the
okay, so
sheriff's
it's
been
kind
in
of
the
deferred.
been working very closely with us, and I appreciate his help as well. The only other thing I wanna note, and the chief did mention it earlier, a lot of these numbers are subject to what we end up with the collective bargaining agreements. We haven't really started yet, but there's a proviso with that too.
Will we see that, excuse me, Chair, to the,
Yeah, go ahead.
will we see the negotiations completed before town meeting, or what?
I don't expect that will be the case. There are 8 bargaining units that we have to do all at once, and we're working out a schedule. There's 2 selectmen that are sitting on, if you will, a subcommittee or to help me with that, parameters to go back to the full board, and then we will start negotiating. We're looking at a number of different alternatives right now, and I can't get into anything.
No, I understand that, but it was just sort of idea.
I
of the
don't,
timeline.
it could be if, everything goes really smoothly. If not, it may take a little bit longer, but we've had good negotiations, hard, but good negotiations with the fire department in the last round that we did. We got a lot of changes, they got a lot of changes, and I think we continue to make that kind of progress, so.
Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you very much.
I want to thank you for the opportunity, for allowing me to present my first official budget.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you all. Don't,
You other guys don't wanna,
Sewer department?
Madam Chair, I will do my best this evening on behalf of the sewer department. Mr. Trabue is not able to be here this evening.
Okay.
442,
Tab 12,
Tab
page
12.
442.
Okay,
page 442-1.
One.
right now, it'd be at the end.
Should be.
That's what I'm gonna say, it's right where it should be, right at the end.
So let me start at the beginning, if I could, please, and then open it up to any questions that I will try to answer for you, that aren't dealing with pipes and pumps. Please note that the salary of the department head is split. He's half-time with us at $43,000, he's been with us many years. The other half of his salary comes out of the inspection department, where he is the plumbing and gas inspector too. And if you go through that budget, you will see that as well, so, the administrative supervisor, administrative secretary, that is 75% of the secretarial position. She's 3/4 time with sewer and 25% time in the Board of Selectmen Town Administrator's Office. That is also noted in the Selectman Town Administrator's budget. The user fee pays for 75% of her salary. This is all user fee generated. This is all fee-based. The laborers, there is one full-time additional person in the sewer department who is continuing his education and becoming certified in a number of different things. It is our anticipation that he will be able to take over the manager role. As I expect a vacancy there sometime within the next several months to a year.
Yes.
So the Administrative Secretary, that figure 53 is fee-based.
Correct.
Okay. And if we went to the other department, that's where the other money is. So that, okay, just so that.
Yeah, it's a split position. It's a
Okay.
shared position, yes, sir.
It's not the 75 or the 53, that is what is 75%.
That is the 75%.
Yeah.
Legacy employee.
Thank you.
Overtime, is just that's for calls out, storms, pump failures, red lights on, that means if the light's on, that the grinder pump at one of these areas isn't working, they need to go out. Those types of things. Longevity is just that, and then we have an incentive pay within the union contract for not taking time off, I believe, in a certain
Sick time.
sick time in a certain.
Unused sick time.
Yeah, in a certain amount of time. Really, if you look at the budget over the last several years, it hasn't changed. If you go down to the expense end of it, most of this, with the exception, you'll see the increase on 5318, which is services, waste removal and disposal. This is what we estimate that we will pay to the town of Wareham for the operation of in the transmission of the waste to the facility. It is not the capital expense, that's down below. I want to be very clear to the Finance Committee, as I have been to the Board of Selectmen. We are not at all confident in the numbers that we are receiving from Wareham. We haven't been for a while. We have not paid the bill. We have encumbered the bill. We have, we're concerned that their budget is rising in areas that we're not sure if we should be charged for or not. We have engaged Weston and Sampson, the Board of Sewer Commissioners, in June to start looking at the formula that we put together 5 years ago. We reinvigorated in a negotiation with Wareham on the intermunicipal agreement, the IMA. We beta tested it. Mike Leitzel hand tested it. And we're not getting what we believe is the appropriate backup to some of the numbers, and we are questioning them. Mike Ellis, in the working under Linda, has been very dogged on watching these things, and at some point we will have a meeting with the Wareham Sewer Commissioners. Once we feel that Weston and Sampson has answered some of the questions we have posed to them. This is an estimate, and we aren't comfortable, and all I can tell you is we're working very seriously on it. Without getting into any more detail would put us into some negotiation issues, but we've had concerns.
We've had concerns for a number of years, and I was sitting on the finance committee for 3. I've heard, for 3 years running that there've been concerns. How long has the investigation as such been ongoing, and how long do you think that we're going to it will continue?
Two points to that. At the end of, when, last year, we end up getting numbers which can justify what they have done, but we wait an awful long time. There has been some movement in this year's budget. We've been able to extract the numbers that we've needed to feel that we're pretty comfortable with what we're paying. There were some issues in the FY, or in 16, budget that we're not at all comfortable with. There was a big increase in capital. There was a lot of work on pump stations. There were some new people hired. There was a number of things that we haven't been able to determine in this particular budget how that 19.X% is attributed to Bourne, since we only have 3 pump stations that we travel through. And if there's if there's a big capital expense for upgrading various things, what of that 500,000 goes back to our transmission and pump stations? We're not able to get, that's where we are now. The last couple of years, we have had concerns. Those have been fairly well satisfied. I won't say completely satisfied, but fairly well satisfied. At this point, we have felt that in June of last calendar year, we engaged Weston and Sampson. We have had 3 meetings with them. The chair of the sewer commissioner has been on 2 of those meetings. We have an amendment to that contract that will be coming before the sewer commissioners on Tuesday night. It's a small amendment. It's and they will be moving forward with trying to figure out exactly where we are for FY16.
What type of ongoing oversight do we have? I mean, we're part of this, and
the oversight that we have is based on the the formula. And George goes over there quite a bit. I want to be sure, George goes over and meets with Guy Campina, who's the director of the wastewater facility over there as well. The formula on how things are supposed to be charged off is really the template for how we are able to tell. Now, what we think has happened is inadvertently, I'm going to say, things get plugged into that or something gets taken out, and that changes the formula going down. So we have to reestablish that the formula remains intact.
Well, we met with them. I think it came to light that George and Michael are very concerned about this, and so they've come to us and asked them. I met with them like 3 or 4 years ago, and Debbie, and we all got together, and I think it was Weston and Sampson at the time, came up with this template that they were using to do all the formulas. And they said, would you continue on and use it? Well, then that never happened, and now they've come back to us and said, well, can we use the template again? Well, Mike's taken it, and he can put their figures in, and of course the template works, but we're using their figures to put in the template. So of course it's gonna work. So the question is not, they want us to look at it, but if we're using their figures and the template's working, then that's not the problem. The problem is we need to get the information from Wareham, and that is not necessarily up to, we don't feel it's up to us, since we're not part of the sewer commissioners or whatever. So I think we've had a talk that we really think that at some point maybe we need to see if we can have our auditors request the information or something, but not, and to be honest, I'm not as familiar as the sewer, George is, with what we're talking about. It's Greek to me, whatever they're talking with this flow system and all this. I don't understand that at all.
okay, and that was my next question. Has this entity been audited recently, or ever?
Well, they are municipally audited as, like, other towns are audited.
Is it part of Wareham? Is it a
Yes, yes,
Wareham
it's part of-
enterprise
So
fund? I
basically,
mean,
what we're doing is we're relying on numbers from Wareham.
Correct.
And none of this has been independently audited by the town of Bourne's auditors.
We have not, we have
No.
not gone to that point,
Okay.
no, but I think with George raising the concerns this year, that, I think in the past, it was not as bad, but he came across some things this year where I think he saw that, and correct me if I'm wrong, like one of the stations that they say that they're charging us for isn't even servicing the town of Bourne, so, he knows that information. I mean, if they gave, my office that, we plugged it through, we would have no idea what any of this
Correct.
is. So it's gotta be somebody that works, I think, in conjunction with George and Weston and Sampson that knows what this is.
Weston and Sampson has a thorough list of questions that will be going over to Wareham within the next couple of weeks. We have massaged it, we have looked at it, they have been great, they've been watching the sewer commissioners' meetings on cable, that type of thing. They've been really keeping a good eye. Now we have a full list of questions that we need to have answered. If those are not answered to the degree that we're satisfied, at that point, I think I would go to the selectmen, invoke the intermunicipal agreement, and call for an audit, an independent audit of that system. We aren't there yet. That, from a number of different perspectives, raises a lot of different concerns. So we're working through the engineering firm. They are as familiar with what this formula is and what's supposed to be put in it. We have dissected their budget. George and Michael have done a really good job dissecting their budget, and we're at the point now where there will be a formal, after, I hope, Tuesday night, I don't want to speak for the sewer commissioners before they act on something. Once they act on that, we're gonna be moving in. This is, as I said, we've been able to George has been comfortable enough, and I trust him. He knows the system inside and out. He knows every drop, every corner, every elbow that's in there, and every gallon that flows through. This year, there were some changes to their budget that have us concerned, and we're moving it ahead, I think, expeditiously and in a manner that would be respectful.
no, it's first.
Yeah, is there any financial relief if we're engaging, Weston and Sampson? We are, I mean, they're working for
Right.
us. Is that-
Within the budget.
Yeah,
Are they in the services consultants?
Yes.
So this year, the $15,000,
okay. This is their
Is-
retainer, in other words?
Correct.
is there
Okay.
anything else in there? Or is that all them?
That's it. We encumbered some money from the June budget. There's a $5,000 supplement, and we're within where we're supposed to be.
Bill?
Is there, or has there been a thought of, or a discussion, or it's not possible, whatever, some kind of or the idea of a liaison or somehow or other? I mean, if they're doing all this and we're sitting over here and they're sitting over there, and we're a significant, are we the only town that's involved with them? I mean, there's nobody else around, and the municipality that's part of
As
that
far as
except
I
for
know,
us.
we're the only piece to them, yes.
What kind of a seat do we have at the table?
The liaison generally works between Derek, who's my counterpart, and myself, and I am on the phone, and he's on the phone with me, and we meet frequently to go over our concerns. Additionally, on the intermunicipal agreement, I don't know if it was a 20-year, I think this is a 10-year. Every 5 years, we're to get together, board to board, sewer commissioner to sewer commissioner. That's to happen sometime during this year. George is at the plant frequently. We have enough contact with them, I think, Dr. Town, where there's open communication. We're just need to get some backup to the numbers that they're providing us. And Derek, who's my counterpart, has been extremely willing and open to make that happen.
Okay. Thank you.
If you look at the rest of, if we go to the next page, there's very little change. It's actually down a little bit, my recommendation. The other charges and expenditures, the 188,478 is our part of their upgrade, the upgrade to their plant they did a few years ago. And that's our percentage of the bond on that.
So that's a set
That's a
full-on
fixed fee.
percent, that's fixed fee, that's not,
Although,
they tried
they
to
tried.
Tom, what part of the town is covered by sewer? Is it just Buzzards Bay?
A part of Buzzards Bay, if you would, from Rotary to Rotary,
Uh-huh.
and then back,
Ways,
beyond
okay.
to the
the
bypass,
bypass.
to the bypass.
So it's not over town, so,
There's about, there's 990, call it 1,000
yep,
connections.
okay.
Okay, some are multiple connections, some are single connections.
The rest of the town is all septic. I just wondered
Does that
because,
number include the Hideaway Village?
Hideaway Village.
That includes
Yeah.
Hideaway.
okay,
So that's kind of.
because the deal is, more than half our budget is to the town of Wareham.
That's correct, but,
Between the 188 and the 350.
correct.
well, they're processing,
Yeah.
they're the processing
They're
department, so they, you
Yeah,
know,
right, no, that's the only place to send it, right?
yeah.
You know, we're working on, with the Buzzards Bay Coalition, a number of towns on another project right now. There's a piece for the pocket plant over here on Queen Sewell that we're working on as well. We are very limited.
Sure you
With the Wareham plant, we are limited to 200,000 gallons, of which 30,000 of that is dedicated to Hideaway. It was 60, we negotiated that out. And that's, so,
How much wiggle room do we have left? Not much.
not much. If all of the things that say they're going to happen, we will be pretty much at capacity.
That's what I was,
With
The
some on a
hotel
waiting
and all
list.
this stuff.
I mean, and we still have someone already on a waiting list.
And, yes,
I mean, we have
Right.
so we have someone waiting to get, because they haven't granted that person capacity yet,
yeah, that's what I was just,
yeah. So I have a question about capital replacement equipment. So we've been having in the capital plan requests for capital equipment for the sewer, 45,000 in 2015, which they expended 19,000, and then 60,000 in FY16, which year-to-date they've expended 21,000. And then we have another request for 60,000 next year. So are they only replacing those things that have to be replaced? Or are we on a plan of replacement, and what happens to the money that doesn't get expended? Does that have to become,
It closes back to the retained earnings. Are you talking what's in the budget right now?
well, yeah, so the replacement equipment, those are, and it kind of goes with the principal long-term debt, so there isn't any long-term debt listed this year, so
there is,
what happens with that?
Well-
How is this working in the long term? I mean, are we not spending it and it's going back to retained earnings? It's not, isn't it, is it coming out of retained earnings? Is that what it is? It's not borrowed?
That line 5870
Yeah,
is not borrowed, it comes out of, it's basically part of their budget, so
Okay.
when they don't spend it, it goes back
and
to retained earnings.
effective this year, $30,000 of that. Again, I have to wait till Tuesday night until it's signed, but we have been working with Hideaway on granting them some assistance on their 30% of our area, and pay the same fee as everyone else and not getting a lot of the service. So we've worked and they gave us 30,000 gallons of their
right.
flow.
So this is all, but it's all as needed.
Correct.
So we budget for it in case it's needed, and we only expend what pumps and things need to be replaced.
And if you remember, Madam Chair, a couple of years ago, we had some money in the regular capital budget, which was to buy some pumps and that brought, we replaced some and we have some in stock. So we were able to do that as well. So this is kind of replacing that stock as well.
On the R&M machine and equipment, which is under purchase of services 5248, we seem to appropriate 20,000 and then not spend it. Is it because we've been replacing, been appropriating money to replace equipment? Is this less needed, or is this something completely different? Or do you know?
I can't, I
Okay,
honestly
so
have
just-
to ask George.
Yeah, ask George when you have a chance. And the consultants, we're increasing it from 15,000 to 25,000? And is that all Weston and Sampson? Is that, if we figure it out, do we need to have them still on retainer? I mean,
We will, and if there is a anticipated vacancy, I expect that I can't, then I expect that we are going to need to utilize Weston and Sampson for some institutional memory also going forward.
Okay. Yes, Rich?
Line item 5798, that's the last one, the reserve fund. Can you explain how that works, what that's used for?
The same, it's utilized in the same manner as the town or the ISWIM reserve fund. We would come before you if we needed it. If we had a major pump failure at one of the 3 pump stations, that would run certainly over what our budget would allow. If we had a few years ago, a situation at Taylor Point where we lost an elbow, a major, there was a upper elbow, that gets into a whole different discussion. But it's those types of things. The underground system is getting older. And while we've done a really good job maintaining the pumps, and we got a couple of new pumps from the new bridge construction that was, and some piping that the Commonwealth was able to do that. We have an aging system, and if something goes, we need to be able to come before you and explain why.
So is that money appropriated each year, or is that like it's not a revolving fund?
No.
It's
It's revoted every
Yeah,
year.
it closes out to their retained
it zeroes
earnings.
out at the end of the fiscal year.
Correct, it doesn't accumulate.
Are there any other questions about the sewer?
I have a couple of things. We are going to be, and this is a little into Weston and Sampson, we're going to have a period of time over the next several weeks where there will be no full-time sewer department staff in for a number of different reasons. Some medicals, without getting into it, some other reasons. So while we're gonna utilize what we can out of DPW, there's not a lot of training. We're starting to do that training at DPW, and we're gonna need to be calling in Weston and Sampson, I'm sure, to assist us in some of the technical areas where we have none. And George is hard pressed, and he will, because that's the way George is, George Sala. There's not an awful lot of staff available to dedicate 1 or 2 people to the sewer department.
Do they have people on their staff that actually do the work, or are they only engineers?
Oh, they actually have people that can come
Okay.
down and help, but we may be able to do the work if we have the folks that are guiding.
Telling them
the
what to
work,
do?
right.
Okay.
I don't know how that's going to play out, but I'm just giving you a heads up on it, that's all.
All right, is there anything else on sewer? Okay. Moving on to debt service budget, which is actually under other debt services, tab 10, page 714-78. I emailed everyone, but I did not bring copies. Some of the things that happened this year in debt service. Note the principal long-term debt increased from 2.3 million to 3.3 million, and the interest long-term debt increased from 495,000 to 867,000. The short-term bans went down, 440,000 down to $64,860. But overall, this was a 31% increase in this section. And what's really interesting is that the exempt portion, when you just look at the long-term debt, it increased 1.4 million this year. And the exempt portion of that was 520,000, but the portion of the debt service that's covered by the general fund was an increase of $908,000. Now that was offset some by the short-term decrease, but this was a big increase on the what's covered under the general fund, and it's prompted some discussion in the capital outlay of how we time our borrowing and how much borrowing we should be doing, and looking at things like that. We talked about the fire engine, which is $675,000, making sure that there's kind of a plan on what the impact of this borrowing will be, especially in terms of the general fund, because there's two things that are happening this year when the with the attempt, when we haven't got to the snow and ice yet, to increase the snow and ice budget plus the debt service budget, puts a lot of strain in terms of the amount available for funding operating budgets. So I don't know if we have some more information from
Is this due to one thing, or a couple major things?
So this past December, we did a bond sale, and what causes this up and down is depending on how many votes are authorized or what the capital plan does. What we try to do is actually bond every 2 years, or probably gets into the third year. So this year at the Maytown meeting, and you will ask to vote for some money that will get banned for a year. So if it comes up in May, it won't be borrowed until sometime after July 1st. So the first interest payment won't be due technically until FY18. So there's like a time lag for all of these things. So it's generally, if this year will be the start of we have a ban going out right now. So it will come due in 17. We'll ban it again for another year. It'll come due in 18. Then on the third year, we'll do a bonding. And you can do one every year, or you can stretch them out. We tend to stretch them
Well, if you stretch them out
out
like that,
because it
Linda,
costs less for issuance costs.
does that all of a sudden land a whole bunch of big principal and interest in one
Yes,
year?
depending on the length
So we
of
put it
the-
off for 2 years, and now we're stuck.
So you try and, well, it's not that you're stuck, because if you're doing this every 2 years, it's cyclical and it should stay the same.
Well, that's what we'd hope. That's
Yes.
what I would hope. I would hope the old notes expire, and
Right,
then we
but
take the
you'll
new
get-
notes, and we have the same amount every year.
And you might not,
I would hope.
depending on what you borrow. So depending on the life of the authorization, each issue can be at a different amortization schedule. So you might buy a piece of equipment for 5 years, you might buy something for 20 years of building repair. So when you're looking at these things, you then gotta take into account what's the loan amortization schedule gonna look like? Because you could say, well, we do all these estimates, and we've done it before, and we have them going before capital, that you'll see in the next 2 years, what looks like will come on, but that's assuming that once you get to there, that that's the life left of the loan. If you would do it over a shorter time, it's shorter principal.
Are there big things coming? I mean,
Right
we
now,
did,
no,
we
we
did
just,
the DPW building a year or so ago. We did
that
a
is
school
all,
in-
almost,
5 years ago, I
Yeah.
guess.
So the
Um,
DPW building is a big part of that $520,000 increase in exempt debt. But that was another thing, because that didn't match up with the amount and sources and uses for exempt debt.
well, that's not even gonna end up being the same, because they're borrowing a little bit more in this ban that's coming up, so we're gonna have to add on to that. And
Within their authorization.
right, what happens is there'll be a change that you'll see, because there's premium. So if an exempt debt sells with a premium, you have to then amortize that premium over the life of that loan. So I think we have 4 pieces out right now, 2 of the community building, some at the school, and now we have a DPW project. So every time an issue sells with a premium, that premium for that portion of that note stays with that note for the entire note. So I have probably 6 schedules right now for all of the debt that we have that has sold with a premium, and that carries along with it. So that reduces the amount that you're gonna end up seeing that we can raise on the tax rate. Because you don't raise it to the people, because you already have the money sitting over here in a fund waiting to offset that. So it gets a little bit confusing. But, so I can either show it to you on the top and just say it's not really being raised by the people, because we already have it set aside.
Oh, so you already have a savings account put aside
Or-
to cover this?
Not for the whole thing, it's only
Oh,
for a
I-
piece of it.
So on the exempt debt that was.
So if you see an
The the debt, revenue side of the exempt was 457,276. But it looks like the cost is 520,000 in the budget. Is there something else that's gonna offset that money?
Yeah, how much is the difference, like,
I don't know, 520 minus 475. 45,000?
it shouldn't be that much, but it could be this year, because we had, depends on what came in. If there was a ban that had a huge premium that's coming due in 1 year, it could still be sitting there. I can show you
So one of the things that I thought, I mean, when I started looking at this, is that on sources and uses, we see one number for debt service. And so the one number for debt service
has everything in it.
goes up from 3.2 million to 4.3 million. So you see $1 million increase. So you don't really see that 520,000 of exempt, but 400,000 is, because it's 908,000 of increase in the long-term debt, and then there's a minus for the short-term debt. So you don't really see that some of that is really being absorbed, and I almost think that we need to kind of separate that out so that we see what's covered by the general fund and what's covered by the exempt, just because then you really see what the impact of the borrowing is.
I'm just trying to understand, is it up by $1 million because we bought more stuff a couple of years ago, or because of this bunching of loans?
Well, it's made up of probably a lot of buying, because of the pieces that are in there.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
here.
I have it. So if we did, if it's been a 2-year time span, we have like 2 sets of police cruisers in there. We have 2 school asbestos abatements. There's like 3 DPW trucks. So well, actually there's 4. I mean, there's just there's a whole sheet of things that the capital outlay has authorized over the last 2 years that are in there.
Those are
Not
in the-
2 years, 2 years prior to,
Those are in the bans.
this is a permanent
That
debt
was the
issue.
14 million permanent ban
Right.
that we just did. Right.
So that was in December. So you see the effect of that coming up in, that huge increase coming up in the 17th.
So this is,
If you go back and look at previous debt schedules, tends to stay relatively the same, but then sometimes there's a drop.
Hope.
Yeah, and then, but the years that it's a drop is not a good thing, because then you see that as available funds, and if you then put that towards, if you continue to keep your budget the same and you use that for other reasons, but then the next year the debt jumps up. So I know we've gone through creating debt schedules and looking at that, but I don't think we look at them, but we never get to the final point of
Yeah, so, I mean,
decision of
this is
what is
really
the
kind of
policy.
just information. It's a first step because it's gonna be part of the capital outlay discussion, and it's something that we've now talked about, a capital outlay, and one of the, when, in your book, in your budget book, there's a debt schedule in the budget book. That's only the long-term debt. That has already been created into long-term debt, so you don't see any of the debt that is either in bands or in short-term. So one of the warning things, and I think I asked about this last year when we were at $440,000 of short-term bands. I said, what is this $440,000 and why has it gone up so much? And we got into this premium discussion, but I think that that's kind of a warning too. And I think we need to just think about it more and how do we get it so that it is a little bit more consistent? Because the long-term thing, you can see that there will be drop-off going down the road, but we have to do some, I think, planning around this issue.
We have a ban going out right now, which will have an interest payment, one interest payment due next year. Then whatever is voted at town meeting, we'll have an interest payment due the following year, plus the one that's out this year. So it doubles up, and then year 3, usually we do it. Sometimes we've done you can bond within 1 year, but it tends to cost a little bit more, because then you have to pay the rating agencies and all that. So we try to group them together. It's a little bit more cost saving to do it that way. And if you get into the habit of doing it that way and keep your debt consistent, then it should stay the same.
But thinking about that and keeping consistent and what should we spend our money on? So if we have those ban years where we're not doing that bump up, maybe those are years where we do things like increase the snow and ice budget to get it more, or put it to OPEB so that we have this money and we want to, no, because then you're not putting it to other things, which is going to create a problem in the future. So it's really more
that-
discussion around it. It's just an
Up
interesting.
until, what is this, was it this year or the year before, we had the middle school debt, which was funded inside of this.
Yes.
And once that dropped off, that left a lot of room available on the debt service side, so.
So it's just, go ahead, George.
Yeah, just real simple for, if you could look at that spreadsheet that Linda did, and you have to notice that she actually clipped the upper right-hand corner so it would fit. A lot of work down there. But anyway,
Good planning.
the first 2 items at the very top is just a real quick example. If you look at library, that debt is about to be retired. And the interest rate
I think it's the
is-
oldest is at the top, so that's, yeah.
Well, or, yeah.
It is, that's, as they've come in, that you'll see there, that's how
Okay,
they
so
are.
we don't know when that started, but we know it's about, because if you look at the percentage of interest to principal, it's down about 3%. And then you take one line down, if you look at Bourne High School window replacement, it's fairly early in its process because of the interest rate is so proportionately high. We're paying $10,500 on a principal of $27,000. But as you see, it just gradually goes down as it ages because it's front-end loaded, I guess.
That's the principal payment plus the interest payment, isn't it? That's not the total debt.
No, you've got one column for each, Rich.
Yeah, principal and
Yeah.
interest each year.
Then looks nice as the debts are about ready to be, if a bunch of them are retiring all at once, it does look very nice, very tempting to,
Yeah, there's a window of
Take that opportunity.
Yeah, and you can see some of the things further, actually, some of the things that are further down, you can see drop off, because those are the things like the police cruisers or tasers, or those are some of the 5-year borrowing things versus the 20-year. The high school roof that's a long borrowing,
Yeah.
and so anyway, this is just a preliminary discussion, just to bring it to the attention on the finance committee, and we'll talk more about it. What are the rates that we're getting for bands at this time?
I think we generally budget around 2%.
And I think about that in terms of capital outlay, is that if we keep in mind that we should borrow X amount of dollars in order to stay into this process, I think it gives us a parameter to work on to, and decide, can we buy this fire engine this year, or do we have to wait, or is it okay for us to do it? If we buy it this year, we're not gonna be banding it to the same amount of time, so it's a moot point. I mean, it's all part of I think, the whole discussion. Brian?
What I take away from it is, gee, when you go to buy a piece of equipment that's good size, you can pay for it this year and avoid the problems, or you can string it out to a loan. Now, when you string it out to debt, you can't forget that you're gonna have these problems come back at you in a few years. You just,
Debt schedules are very
Yeah.
important.
well, you just can't forget about it when you're buying things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like another fire engine, we'd like lots of things, but
But debt is debt.
it is.
Okay, any other questions about the debt service issue? Okay. Long-term projection?
Well, I hesitate
I'm
to
gonna
give
be-
it, hesitate to give it to you, because the debt on that one's, when you look at the excluded debt, is not the same, it's off by a little bit more. And, that's just one of those things that, I haven't gotten back to, but the rest.
Well,
the rest of it looks-
I think that
and
if
that's
we look
actually
at this
gonna-
as a draft, it would be
'Cause it's
good,
actually
because
gonna
we
change
really
because-
haven't, we haven't got one yet as part of our budget, and I think it's an important thing for us to have, and we can get a final one before town meeting that's, based on whatever budget is approved, but I think it would be good to have something so that we can at least start looking at it.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to leave this with the finance director. I have some other issues that I have to go back to town hall
Okay,
and deal with, get some letters off before
good luck.
some things that
Okay.
came up.
Yeah,
over
we
the
can
weekend.
pretty much finish up with the long-term
I
projection.
have no, comments
Maybe
for
the revolving fund.
Finance committee
Okay.
this evening.
Any further?
The long-term projection is that I'm going to be 127 pounds and 5'10" again, but that's. Thank you, Linda.
There you go.
Thanks.
Tomorrow. We have a lot of things to go over tomorrow
When I get back.
when you get back from school. Tomorrow too? Okay. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? All right, I'll see you when you get back.
We need one more.
I'll bring it over, I'm right. Here.
Go ahead, I go.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
I didn't bring my glasses tonight.
There will be some changes to the debt service budget actually before it goes to town meeting, because they just voted $1.2 million for landfill, and then they voted community preservation, and we just did fire truck, right?
No, we haven't voted the fire truck.
No, we did ambulance.
Oh, the
Ambulance was for the
yeah.
ambulance fund, but it wasn't a borrowing, so. And the capital, we haven't done our capital yet, and I'm not sure whether you have any cash in there for capital or whatever. So is the budget that's in here for FY16, is that, what was it passed at the special town meeting, is that updated?
Yes.
February special town meeting, that is. And the proposed budget for fiscal year 17, is that what's in our books, or have there been other adjustments?
Should be what's in the book.
And, okay. So then we have assumptions for rates of growth on different things, and
Probably the one, item of change is the, increase in the amount from the ambulance to fund the dispatch is up. You'll see the ambulance fees went from 107 to 1225. That's in the special revenue section.
Is that for FY 17? Okay. So that was part of the discussion around the SAFER grant, was that, while we had the SAFER grant and needed additional money for dispatch, that money would come from, temporarily from the ambulance fund. But that needs some discussion, because I don't know if it can continue to come from the ambulance fund forever, so.
And there's, in that same section, 123,851 from overlay surplus that we're gonna be, closing out this year. The only other highlight, is that the amount that you see for free cash at the very bottom that we end up in, that's proposed for 17 of the 4.2 millions. It starts from free cash with the, I think I used the one that you had, final one that you had, the free cash with, adding in, Cody, but yeah.
Right.
I think that, I don't think I have the copy with me, but it.
So it's not a formula, it's just a plugged-in number, is that what you're saying, for FY 17 free cash?
Well, FY 17 is built off of that very bottom figure of the 5.3 million, and then taking,
Okay.
then taking off what it's gonna use, the 1.116 out of free cash.
So this shows us with fiscal year 17 being within policy, and fiscal year 18 being within policy. I mean, one of the things about the long-term projection is that it doesn't account for any turnbacks, it doesn't account for any increases in revenue, and so, you know, it's really conservative, especially over time. That can make a big difference in terms of the, effect on the reserves, because if you have $1 million of turnbacks and excess revenue, that puts you in a much better position, and it doesn't appear that that's true in the long-term projection. So, I think this actually looks pretty good. Okay. So we'll have this to look at, everyone can take their time looking at it. Thank you very much. I'm gonna write draft on this.
I already see, I already know that's gonna
Write
change.
draft. But this, and this shows using 1,116,000 of free cash towards the budget, so, which is probably what's in sources and uses, I think, so. It looks good. Okay. Any other questions on long-term projection? The other things that we had for follow-up was group insurance. Not yet. Revolving funds, so we had, Linda had emailed me and I forwarded to all of you the revolving funds report, for fiscal year 15 and then for the first 6 months of fiscal year 16. Does anyone have any questions about the revolving funds?
No. I looked into it over the week, not for quickly. I did find a law from the State House. It does allow municipalities to set up revolving funds. What my complaint last week was following the budget, that all of a sudden there are these items that are kind of off the budget and we don't see the complete expense. In my accounting world, I've always seen, you know, all the dollars collected, all the expenses paid, and that's what I expect to see here. That's what bothers me more than anything else, is that this money is off to the side. The other question I have, again, coming from the accounting world, is, okay, these funds are off the books, they're being controlled by department heads here and there. What kind of internal controls are there over these?
Well, they run exactly like any other bill does. It has to come through my office. We, look it over and make sure it's,
Comes through your office? So a department head doesn't decide he's gonna spend $5,000 on,
no, all has to come through us. They submit the bill for payment.
does it go through you and Tom too?
Yep, we both sign the warrant.
Okay, oh, all right, so
So-
that's comforting.
Yeah, there's nothing gets paid.
Yeah, the department heads, actually,
They have no control over anything
Yeah.
like that. Nobody writes checks.
No, that's what my fear is, because nobody knows, I don't know about it.
Yeah.
And some of the other people don't know about it, and I have all these fears in my mind that, it's off the books, nobody knows, there's no budgeting, well, I guess there still isn't any budgeting.
There is, because each town meeting, this is brought before the voters,
That
and
is
then
a
they
very
decide.
good summary, but
They
the
decide, this is the summary that's in the back of the book, but within one of the revolving fund articles, it says, do you approve the spending limits for this department? And each one is listed.
each department has a limit to what they can
Yeah.
spend.
And if during the year, it is allowed that if during the year, say library needs to spend more than we authorize, it's allowed to go before the Board of Selectmen to get an increase in that.
I see, so,
amount.
so there is someone watching this other than the department.
Yes.
I think that the thing that was different, and we haven't really had the discussion around revolving accounts.
No, we never have, and I've been on the committee a year and a half, and this is still striking me that every once in a while I find something, here's $150,000 over here in the rec department that wasn't on the budget. And, yeah, it's kind of upsetting to me, because I thought I had the whole department in front of me. And what brought it to light was the girl from the rec department did a pretty good job with her reports, and she's showing me things that I don't see in some of the other departments. So here we are with all this money floating around.
But it's really fee-based for the programs that they provide. So if there's swimming lessons, they charge a fee for the swimming lessons, that comes in as revenue. They pay the swimming instructors, and that goes out as expense. So it's really
And
to
it just
fund the
stays in that
programs.
department,
And it
but-
stays in the revolving fund, and that's really the purpose of the revolving fund.
I mean, she doesn't get to keep, she brings the money over to us, we deposit the money, and then if she needs to pay a bill, she brings a bill over and a check is cut from the town to pay
Oh,
the
okay, so
vendor, so it's.
We
she
didn't
has
understand
no-
that just from the,
Right, she has, the only other department that can write checks is actually the student activity accounts in the schools, but
Yeah.
other than that, no.
nothing, okay. I did find those numbers on the auditor's report. So he's looking at them as well as everybody else.
Anything like revolving funds, so just like special revenue accounts, if you looked in any of the reports in the annual report and saw the number of special revenue accounts we have, which are mixed within the revolving funds,
Well,
They-
there's revenue that comes in and there's expenses go
it
out.
has a specific purpose, so it's designated for a specific reason, so it stays in a special fund. Ambulance fees.
Waterways, I mean,
Waterways, there's tons of different grants, there's tons of different, you can.
Yeah, the grants bother me a little bit more that they're off the books. And the reason is you've got an expense going along nice and smooth, and all of a sudden the grant runs out and it jumps way up here. And we've just gotta keep an eye on those.
Well, and that's why we are asking the question now, do you have line items in your budget that are supported by other revenue? And what is that revenue, so that we understand if it's coming from the revolving or a grant or something else, that we understand that it's, first of all, not all paid by the taxpayer, but second of all, if we lost that revenue source, something would have to be done about that budget, so. Okay,
I'm all set.
all right, good. Are there any other budget follow-up questions from any other budgets that we've looked at? Good. Okay, minutes of previous meetings. We got some minutes emailed to us, which I don't know, I did not look at, so. anyone looked at them? I think we'll defer.
I looked at them.
Did you?
I looked at them,
Okay,
yeah.
what, are they the 22nd?
22nd.
22nd,
Yeah.
Okay,
I move approval.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Oh, all right. Any suggestions for future meeting topic schedule? Anything? Next week, where's our schedule? Next week is March 14th. We have the Bourne School Department and the Upper Cape Tech School District on our Monday night meeting. And then Tuesday night, we have the meeting at 6:30 with the Board of Selectmen in executive session on about the
Oh,
legal
I thought
budget.
that was tomorrow,
No, it's next week,
next week.
next
Okay.
week.
I'll
It's
try
the
to plan on
15th,
it.
the 15th.
Dick's birthday, as I can't go. We already have a big.
I think you had already left last week when we were talking about that date, yeah, okay. Okay, no town administrator comment, finance committee comment? Public comment? You have a comment, Jim?
Briefly. Wareham has a small tabloid weekly. Last week, there were 2 candidates over there for the sewer commissioner's job. In those 2 articles, they were very critical of the town of Bourne, openly in press, of not having met its financial obligation to support the Wareham sewer system. Now, a sewer processing plant admittedly is an expensive operation. High energy, high chemical costs, personnel costs, maintenance costs, the disposal of the sludge. It's an expensive operation. I guess the question that could go back to the administrator is, in comparable sized systems, is there a baseline, rather than say we have this tonnage of chemical in the personnel, is there a baseline for a comparable sized system for processing and disposing of the effluent for, say, 200,000 gallons? In other words, a figure that is industry-wide, rather than trying to break it down into how many pumps were replaced or how many personnel were hired.
Weston and Sampson would have that, or would have
Probably, yeah.
reams of data on comparable systems. The engineers should do that.
Their accounting procedures have been much questioned by this town for a number of years, but I'm looking for another way, perhaps to approach it. Thank you, and the sewer advisory group might look into that also. Thank you.
Busy.
Okay. There being no further business, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes,
At 9 o'clock. That's my goal.